Hey everybody, how you doing? Okay, so sorry for the dark look here. My hair is a little bit long, so I'm wearing a hat. I do that. You may have seen older videos of me doing that. I don't know. Anyway, just a few housekeeping things first. First of all, don't forget your rewrites are due on Monday. Some of you, if you know, not a lot of time left until tomorrow night, but whatever. If you want to send me something, I might be in and about Super Bowl day. It's Sunday right now. So if you want to send me something, I maybe I can give you a little idea like if you're heading in the right direction. But like I said, I'll probably be in and out today and I'll be around tomorrow. But like I provided you an example of the story that's worked. So, you know, basically again, the idea here is to actually just really just write a story about somebody you know. Okay. I'm not trying to make fun of the person or anything like that. Somebody wrote about Tom Brady. Well, that's not somebody maybe don't necessarily know. So just basically write about somebody you know because you can actually interview them. Okay. I want you to actually be like, you know, living and working the actual job and everything here. Okay. Um, all right. So almost everybody got in their ideas. I'm not trying to be passive aggressive there, just saying almost everybody got their ideas in. And I'd like to congratulate Alex and Cameron. You probably saw it already because you get a notification about it, but I did pick their idea. And let's actually like share the screen right now. So that means they will get a half grade higher on this particular next assignment, which will be due 2 weeks from now. I'll go into my reasoning for why I chose it. And by the way, I waited a couple minutes for this video to start just to tell you that actually I'm going to be giving away some answers. I want to see basically who actually is watching these videos, I have to say, because I'm still seeing some stuff. Maybe I'm going too fast. I don't know. I'm still seeing some stuff that should have been kind of addressed already in your stories and your worksheets. So I'm going to be giving away some answers in a bit. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, all right. So this is my email here. All right. So here we go. All right. Actually, I should have had this up already. And of course, I should put this into the student view. Okay. All right. So, it's really like, is there like true winner in this whole thing? I don't know if you, I mean, yes, give him credit for coming up with an idea. It's really good. But let me try to explain my thought process here. It would be the easiest thing in the world to do to pick COVID. And in a way, this is kind of COVID connected. Okay. But I also feel like this also speaks to what I've talked about before about a little bit before about coming up with ideas and trying to come up with like the best idea, but not only that, but like trying to come up with like the most details and informations about things. So what I'm trying to get at is here is you typically have a story, you have typically what they call a main bar. Okay, that's basically your main story. But now, they try to like drill in deeper to like what people may be saying, like what basically I do in my digital media classes. I'll have a main bar where actually we'll pick a topic and we'll get the Rutgers students' reaction to something. And then what happens often is there's something that's called a sidebar. I guess this could be one word, but whatever. A sidebar is one word. Right. And that's basically something that kind of branches off the main story. Usually it's a story that kind of drills down more specifically on what's going on. Maybe like what happens is this happens with videos. Videos are considered sidebars on a digital news story. You have their main written story, and they'll interview 3 to 5 people about a certain topic like crime. And then they'll take that one, there's one person out of that 5 or whatever who has maybe a more interesting story than others. So keep the main bar story because obviously that's important, because you got to address the whole entire issue. But then maybe they'll want to like branch off into a sidebar, maybe a separate story, maybe a video that kind of drills down into the person's personal experience even more. Maybe like there's like you interview 5 people about crime, and there's like one person who actually had to deal with this issue at their house or whatever, and then you want to maybe like drill down a little bit more into their personal experience, and that's something you can't really necessarily get into the main bar. It'll bury it or won't get enough details because this is about a group of people and maybe this is about one person. There's also a way of handling it's called a follow-up. So basically you have your main story, and then maybe you kind of follow up with like a specific detail about a person's situation, or maybe you have a situation where you have, there's new developments, there's new feature stories that come out of it. Like I said, maybe there's a main bar about COVID, and then you do like a follow about one person's experience about dealing with COVID or something. So you try to like keep the story going live and fresh, but you do like different follow-up or different ideas that come out of it. So what am I trying to get it to here is that I can almost vision this crime story as basically like you have your main bar as a COVID, and then maybe eventually you do a follow-up that's kind of like an offshoot of that, and that is crime in the Rutgers area. Because they say crime is up nationwide, and a lot of it has to do with just, maybe like there's issues that involve police or whatever. There's issues with like actually like the management of crime and that sort of thing. So what I want to do is actually I want you guys to do a story about crime in the Rutgers area. Now I put a big note here, okay, because I realize that some of you are international, some of you are not in this country right now, and some of you are not even in New Brunswick. So I put up a big note about that. So don't fret, okay? We will get this done, even if you're not around. I just wanted, why am is that you will get the same score, you get the same, review that you would normally get if you were here or not. Okay, so, but there's a lot of stories that are done by people, especially nowadays, especially in the COVID times, people long distance, and they do it through Zoom, they do it through whatever. Okay, they find a way to get it done. Okay, most stories are actually not done actually like person to person, usually done via the phone, they're done via like an email, they're done via like a Zoom call, whatever. So but I also found a way to actually address this so that maybe you don't have even those connections. So I actually put up a discussion point, and this is one. Some of you had asked, like, well, how do you have class participation in a in a class that's asynchronous, okay, online? Well, this is how you do it right here. You have a discussion point and you participate, and I'll be looking at that to seeing who's participating in the discussion point. It's not everything that goes into class participation, but it will be a big part of it because it won't be the only discussion point, okay? So anyway, this story, again, this is Alex and Cameron's idea. How do Rutgers students feel about the rise in crime in the area? Maybe it's a little judgmental, or if there has been, because some people may feel that's exaggerated also too. That has been an ongoing situation actually at Rutgers, and I feel like and I have to admit my classes have written about it before. So I feel like it's something that actually has to be addressed, because it is something that actually goes into the whole idea of like quality of life at a campus and quality of life. Well, why would you go to that school if you feel like you're not safe? So anyway, so here is what the story is about. Please do a story that answers this question. Again, congratulations to Alex and Cameron for choosing the assignment. You'll be getting extra credit. How do Rutgers students feel about the rise of crime in the area? Again, important note for international students and everybody else for that matter who is not, because it doesn't just affect people international or people, who may be away from the Brunswick campus, but everybody should be participating in this. There is, I'm sorry, I didn't word this right. There is a discussion point I'm going to post. Oh my God, this is really written poorly. I apologize. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. All right, sorry about that issue there. Okay, so anyway, this is where the discussion point I posted is going to be incredibly important. I'm going to need you all, my students, to participate in this and provide feedback to discussion points since not everybody's in New Brunswick or near New Brunswick to write about. Please see the discussion, provide an opinion and an anecdote. Should have a comma there. Remember that this is part of your class participation grade. So if you go down to discussions, okay, you should see this, okay? Discussion on third assignment. How do you feel about the rise in crime in the Rutgers area, or have those reports been exaggerated? Okay, so you can see you could provide it right there. Discussion for the third assignment. How do you feel about the rise of crime in the Rutgers area, or have those reports been exaggerated? I'm kind of looking for both opinions because it's really opinion here more than anything. I'm not looking for anybody to dig into stats. Don't go to other news publications and say, like, there's been a certain percentage, blah, blah, blah. I'm just looking for people's perceptions. This is important. this provides like a slice of life of what's going on at the school, and it's better to really get it from the person's eyes, what they see, okay, what they hear, okay. Please provide an anecdote or some kind of personal story that speaks to the question, either whether they feel it's safe or not, okay. Again, it's been kind of an issue at Rutgers for a while now. So, maybe people feel like it's exaggerated, or, people you interview and they go out and they could tell a personal story or anecdote, basically just talking about how, they go out to like Easton Avenue or whatever, and they feel like there's a lot of life out there, and there's a lot of people who are maybe like in a good mood or whatever, and there's no signs of crime, or they've never heard of anything, okay, and they feel safe, totally safe walking into Thomas Suites or something, okay. So yes, so that's what I want you to do. I want you to actually participate in that discussion point, and it will be up, okay. So here's what I'd like you to do: interview 3 to 5 students. Like I'm saying in this video right now, outside of the discussion point, let me know if you need help. If you feel like you want to go beyond that, you want to interview people, feel free to reach out to me, okay? And then like, I'll just maybe like pick out people or something and say, can you talk to so and so? If you feel like you want to participate in this and you don't want to put in a discussion point, and you're willing to be interviewed, feel free to email me, okay? Like I said, I've created a discussion point to provide answers to this question. This is a 800 word assignment. The theme of the story is around the central prevailing consensus opinion, okay, which could be either like, yes, this is like for my safety, whatever, I feel like there's like been more crime, or I feel like it's been exaggerated, or maybe there's a mixed reaction you have, I have here Rutgers, you could have a lead that says Rutgers students say they're worried about a rise in crime in the Rutgers area. You shouldn't have Rutgers twice, and they're worried about their safety. Or perhaps the consensus opinion is more mixed. Rutgers students, they have mixed opinions about the safety in the area, which with some saying the reports of the crime, are exaggerated, while others are not, or something, okay? So you have some sort of essentially umbrella topic, as I call it. Umbrella topic that basically it kind of addresses the consensus opinion of the people you interview. It's not a poll, okay? It's just basically a glimpse or a mirror of what's going on in people's lives, okay, and at the Rutgers campus, okay. All right, so let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that story right now, okay, and how we would go about it. Now we're going to go into what I would say, like kind of more the inner skeleton of what. It's actually just taking me 1 second. Let me go into the inner skeleton of how that story essentially will work, okay. All right, so what do I mean by inner skeleton? Okay, so we have here, I've talked to you about the inverted pyramid. I've talked to you about, how about, most important things should come first. I've kind of provided more of a general overview of how the structure of a story has worked. And I've touched on this a little bit, but now I'm going to get into a little more detail as it pertains to this assignment, which again is actually due in 2 weeks. So it'll be due on February 28th. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So let's say like this is the actual lead of your story. Okay. I should say campus. You shouldn't really try to repeat words twice in the same story. That's really kind of like, it's really kind of like creates a bump in the road for the reader when they read something that sense of redundancy. You want to try to avoid repetition when you're actually writing this story, because it's just something that kind of this tends to kind of make the reader bored. Okay. So Rutgers didn't say their words. So let's say that this is the kind of the consensus opinion that you have like 5 interviews you say. So that is your lead. Okay. That basically kind of dictates what the rest of the story is going to say. If I was going to do a social media post, I would probably like just lop that off and put it right onto the tweet. Okay. And what you want to do again, you want to basically kind of break this down into smaller details to back up the lead. Okay. So the first thing you do again is essentially have a transition that basically gives me like one reason why, the first maybe reason why your students feel this way, and it could come from one person. Okay. It's just John Brown. You want to identify where they're from. They're a Rutgers student. They're not, you want to point out that they're actually from Rutgers. Obviously, they're not from Rutgers. Okay. And that's why I put, those of you who are international students, that's why I want you to, If you'll have a discussion point, they'll actually rely on. I'm giving you 2 weeks to do this assignment, so there should hopefully be plenty of time to get that information. Okay. Okay. Actually, I'm sorry, not in the transition is actually I meant to say, transition is actually like essentially like we'll kind of break down the larger point more. We're not getting into John Brown yet. So maybe we say like some students say, one of the reasons why they feel this way because they've heard about students impacted and it makes them scared. So you get into maybe the what has happened first, okay? All right, and then maybe like personal experience, something like, so maybe you basically just kind of state the problem, basically what, they're worried about the crime, well, or how did they hear, or how do they, well, they heard about it, okay? That's like one way of breaking this down into smaller details, okay? Then you've got an anecdote. John Brown, John Brown said he, Rutgers student says he won't go, I don't know, to the bars. Maybe some of you don't know how to do this yet because of what he's heard. Okay, so that's like a personal experience that breaks it down even more. So this is where the best reporting comes from, where you basically almost feel like you're sitting there with the person, they're sharing the experience with you. Okay, so you go from the macro, there's a fear about crime. Well, break it down like, how is there a fear about crime? It's because of what people heard. And John Brown, he's heard it, so this is what's happening to him. He's just basically not going anywhere near the bars, okay? And maybe come in here with like a quote saying just like a very short quote, it's not safe, or it's not safe, so I just won't go. Something that's quippy, something that actually be something said in conversation, okay? You go another transition that kind of answers the who, what, where, why, when question. Okay. So you basically would probably do it like something like, maybe one of the things I think about would be like, well, how is there another example? How is this happening? Perhaps. And this could be something that basically people observe. Other students say it's not safe because the campus isn't light enough. I've heard that talk about happen in a lot of places, a lot of areas, or a lot of places at Rutgers. They feel like it's just not, it's not, it's something that basically is an issue for people. And then maybe, and maybe you have a person saying, Janice, I don't know, a Rutgers student says not having a lighted campus forces her to bring a flashlight or something, or put on their phone or something, personal experience. You're going one at a time here, like what I call blocks, okay? Okay. Basically giving the different reasons why people feel like, there's a rise in crime in the area and it's making them feel not safe, okay? All right. Maybe another reason would be that, they've actually witnessed things like fights and things like that. Maybe another thing would be, not just the fights, but, maybe like cars or something like that. They see the cars driving around and, or, maybe they feel like they've been looking at their email and they've seen like, a lot, I don't know if I've really seen more of this, but maybe they've seen like, incidents pop up or something like that. Now, again, that's if there's a rise in crime in the area. Now, the opposite would be like if, you could have people who say the opposite. You got people say like that these reports are exaggerated. So maybe like actually, I haven't seen a lot of actually these things. I used to see a lot of Kenneth B. Kopp emails pop up in recent years. I actually haven't seen a lot of those recently. So maybe that would be a reason why some students feel like there's not a rise in crime in the area or something. Okay. So you just kind of point out those kind of personal examples why people feel that way. Okay. So that's how I like you to go about this story. Again, we have 2 weeks to go about it. If you want to like maybe get started a little bit on it ahead of time, and like give me an idea. Unfortunately, that's like one of the best things I had about an in-person class was that actually I would get people started on it right away, and then we would actually talk about it and kind of take it from there. Okay. And then I would be able to lean over their shoulder, but we can't do that now. So here we are. Okay. You'll see if actually in the modules, I actually talk about this structure, this what I call the lead transition anecdote quote structure. It's actually under February 14th. And this is kind of like the general way I like you to follow a story. Okay, so you have your identify what the story is about in the lead, and then the lead, transition. The first one breaks down the lead, first point to back up the theme, which is identified in the lead. And an anecdote essentially is a story within a story, real life scenario that backs up the transition. And then a quote essentially is a color to eliminate your first point. Okay. And then it kind of just rinse, repeat. It kind of repeats itself. Now, does every story have anecdotes? No, they don't actually. Your typical hard news story actually typically is just essentially like a series of transitions. Okay. Biden called Putin to warn him that invasion of Ukraine would have like dire circumstances. And then your first point about that, like, well, what happened? What did he say? That would be essentially a transition. You're transitioning from one point to the next. Biden made the call and told Putin that maybe some details that impose like large sanctions, blah blah blah. Another point about that, basically kind of might be pointing out the significance of the situation. This is the first major step that Biden has taken to. That's like another transition. Essentially, there's no personal anecdotes. First step that Biden has taken to basically address the situation more directly. Okay. Okay, so I said before that actually kind of shifting gears here that I would actually talk about the lead assignment, the lead worksheets, and those I actually put up entry for that too. That is actually going to be due on the 21st. The rewrite of those. You're actually going to rewrite those. I mean, a couple of people actually got A's, so you actually don't have to rewrite those. So congratulations, the first A's of the semester. Actually, I'm going to show you an example of one of those A's right now. Anyway, this is where I'm going to give away answers because I'm going to show you like what I was looking for in terms of answers for this story in terms of leads. As far as the rewriting is concerned, somebody asked me about that. I mean, you don't have to rewrite every single lead if you've just the ones I made notes on, just the ones that basically, where I felt like were insufficient, and for some of you, it was pretty much a collective insufficiency. So you basically have to rewrite everything. Sure. Okay. All right. So let's see here. I'm actually going to show you again. This is a leads that worked. Really, I mean, it's just a matter of just trying to keep things really kind of laser focused on what's going on. You can see that leads are not very long, right? They don't have to, and some of you, I guess, kind of felt like maybe to play it safe, you put in 2 sentences or something, and then I told you that's a no-no. Playing it safe is a no-no, okay? Basically, one sharp, focused sentence is what matters. And I kind of gave some hints away on the first one. Basically, you had 2 choices to make right there. It was a rise of child abuse cases from 2.5 to 2.7, or 3 to 4 children die every day. So that's like new information being revealed, 3 to 4 children die every day, versus the news that 2.5 and 2.7. What really matters most to people? This is where you can't really put this into a rubric, you have to almost sit in the reader's shoes and basically say what would matter to me if I was learning this for the first time? Okay. What would personally affect me to the point where I might even cry about it? It's awful. And to me, a 2.5 to 2.7 does not show a big increase. It's horrible. Any increase is horrible. And you like to see an actual decrease. But to learn and actually 3 to 4 children die every day, that's what would matter to me the most. Okay. So he actually had made a point of, some of you actually started off with things like on Monday or on every day. You really got to get right into the story. The first thing I should see is maybe what is happening. Okay. And it matters with words too. Okay. If you put in a gigantic clause that basically says in a report, according to blah, 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 you're taking forever to get into the story. Get into the story much like you would in a conversation. What did you just learn? It's horrible. I just found out. What is that? 3 to 4 children die every day. That'd be the first thing out of your mouth. If you're actually somebody asked you this question. Okay. this was an important one. I saw some of you said that people protested. I saw some people say like there were a number of people there, but this is where you have to like think about what I call the biggest, newest thing in a story. Okay. And the newest thing that happened here was that people were arrested. Wouldn't it be like a bigger deal if there were like a couple of thousand people who showed up for a protest, but then like a bunch of them were arrested? If a bunch of people showed up for a protest, that obviously is a big deal. Okay. But it's an even bigger deal if they actually take a step further and they're arrested. That's the biggest, latest thing that's happened. Okay. So try to use your like judgment there and think about like, that's obviously like, just not just a protest, it's a protest for people, it's actually an arrest, it's actually a crime scene, okay? You can call it that, okay? This was a little tricky, but I thought it was, again, thinking the unique and unusual. How many times have you seen a situation where people actually have gotten robbed of food? You think that they would actually rob the guy's money, Again, thinking unique into, thing, okay? Let's just jump to the next one. These were like two important, really, I mean, they're all equal importance, but these were two where I was really kind of felt like I was testing you. Okay. And by the way, this is AP style. I saw people use percentage symbols. This is why I don't give quizzes. Okay. Percent is actually spelled out in AP style. Okay. It's not the symbol. Why? Because not the symbol is not your original, believe it or not. These were two big ones for me. 53% jump in murders. Would you want to live in that town? If you saw that? No. Okay. So that was a big deal to me. You just can't just say like there was an increase in murders. Well, was there a 1% increase, a 2% increase? No, it was a 53% increase. It's a huge jump. I realize that these kind of things can be exaggerated, especially if you have like a number that jumps from, let's say, 2 to 3, which is technically a 50% increase. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about probably larger numbers here. Okay, there's a 53% increase in like a larger town or even a state. That's actually like a big number. Okay. Same thing goes with the 10% increase in skin cancer rate. Okay. Not in love with the, probably should say rates, not prevalence, but 10% increase in that. Okay. You want to, that's the numbers matter so many times. They actually really like tell like an entire story of something. And what they do in this particular case is they actually show that there's a big jump in something, and this is where I talk about the whole idea of like showing, not telling. Show me the data that shows like the troubling aspects of whatever is going on. I mean, we saw this with the coronavirus. Okay, with COVID. When the Omicron came, the numbers jumped way up, so that became the story. Okay, and that basically is indicative of something. It basically shows your subject matter right there, that there was a change and a significant change. Okay. This one like goes into like motive, and I actually like, what I do is I always often, this is like a big one for me, actually another big one, in that there's so much going on here, and this would be like, somebody wrote like a really long lead, somebody tried to break this into 2 sentences. There's actually a way of handling this without like, really getting the reader bogged down. This is not the way I would write this lead because there's just too damn much in this right here. But what you want to make sure is you want to laser in on what's really kind of like happening here and what's really unique about it. Okay. I mean, you can almost like kind of break, sometimes it's good to, when you actually go over a certain story, kind of break it into parts, and try to figure out from there, like what's the most important thing here. Okay. And what's the most unique thing and what separates the story from the rest. Okay. So this would matter, obviously, like, and by the way, this is actually what's typically done. Okay. If I haven't said this already, saw some of you put names in leads. Actually, what happens is usually the name is actually usually hard for people to read. It's like not necessarily the most significant thing, to believe it or not. Okay. So there could be like a number of people with almost the same name. If it's a celebrity, then that becomes like, or somebody well known, and that becomes like that should be put in the lead, because that becomes significant. Somebody who's like well known or something, even around town. But here it's not as important, because what's important is there's a woman and what happened. Okay. That's the most important thing. And maybe we put the name in the second paragraph. Okay. And then the town name might matter because maybe it's something that's happened in the area. Okay, so people want to know if it's happened in that town. Maybe they heard about it. Maybe they even know the person, and you want to give an indication of like where it happened. Oh my God, that happened in my town, So anyway, so that's important. But crime happens in probably Santa Ana, so it's not like the most unique thing in the world. Okay, Charges with attempted murder. How often does that happen in the country? Probably like millions, maybe even at least thousands of times, thousands of times this probably happens, maybe tens of thousands of times. This actually could be broken down in more specifics though, but how many times does that happen with somebody who's actually wheelchair bound, Well, then again, we've seen these like crimes against the elderly, crimes against people who are handicapped, disabled, maybe like we get into the hundreds here, okay? Somebody who's sick, that sort of thing. Now we're probably getting into maybe again still the hundreds. I mean, it's not that it's something that's unusual. We have a story already, but it's something that somebody is sick, who gets hurt. We've seen this again, like I said, crimes against the elderly. People take their matters into their own hands sometimes. Again, we're probably be talking across the country, maybe like even like tens, maybe, but hundreds of people or something. It is unique. It is unusual, but it's not the most unusual thing in the world. But this part, how many times have you heard this happen? That's what I would say. Maybe this is a once. Maybe this is the only time. Have you ever heard of this kind of story where somebody actually like tried to take somebody's life reading a chocolate Easter bunny? That to me was the most important thing in the story. That needed to be in the lead. Okay, no matter what. And maybe the other stuff could be moved down in the story or something. So that's why I felt like a 71-year-old woman. This is actually written like a headline. I saw some of this too. Okay, set her. Remember, I talked about the previous video about don't write a headline. Don't write it in present tense. Set her husband on fire, reading her chocolate Easter bunny. Okay, you want to basically write it like almost typically in past tense because it usually happens in the past. But here you could basically say it's laser focused on the actual chocolate Easter bunny being eaten, and that's what caused this horrible event. Okay, that needed to be there. It's almost sometimes just one detail kind of tilts the scales. I told a lot of people, like, it was interesting. These for a lot of people were written the correct way. Okay, it's almost when you got down here it was okay, but up here it struggled. But like I told people to like write every story like this, every lead almost like this one. You got right down to the detail what's going on, how much more I'm going to pay, how much more I'm going to pay to like actually like write. It was repeated twice. To pay to actually like to go to school. Okay, how many more murders? How much more skin cancer? All these numbers matter. How many children die every day? How many people are arrested? Numbers matter. Try to. That's one of the first. There's a movie called All the President's Men where they actually like talk about follow the money, and then basically talks about the President Nixon's administration in the United States in the early 1970s and how it ran into trouble because of a burglary that his White House was involved in, essentially. And one way they've actually found out that Nixon was like kind of tangentially involved, at least, was that they basically followed the money. It was numbers, details that actually led their way up to the top of the the most powerful person in the country. Numbers. It's one of the first things you should look at when you do a story. Is like, is there a number that kind of signifies something that shows change or something of significance? Okay. All right. So that's it on that. Now I had like a couple of chapters, 5, 6, and 10. I actually asked you guys to read. I'm actually, because I don't want to like spend a ton of time on the reading and everything. I'm just going to actually like talk to you about, just kind of like skim over some of these details. But there's 5 and 6 kind of deal with ethics, okay, which goes into the whole idea of actually like when you come up with like stories, the ideas you have for that, and the ideas you also have for like coming up with information for that story. Okay. But anyway, I just want to kind of talk about a little bit about that. Generally speaking, the thing about news stories and ethics is that you really want to avoid what they call defamation. You want to avoid libel. Okay, you want to avoid slander. You want to avoid situations where people are hurt unnecessarily. And one way that can typically happen is when you actually make a mistake in a story, or you do something where you accidentally, as I explained before, misspell somebody's name and then basically you end up identifying the wrong person. Okay. Or basically you write about somebody who actually was accused of a crime or something, but actually they weren't actually, they had nothing to do with it. You might have heard the story of Richard Jewell, who was essentially accused of the crime of, actually, it was even a story from Clint Eastwood about it. The crime of actually bombing the 1996 Olympics, and it turned out he had nothing to do with it. Okay. So that's what a lot of these chapters 5 and 6 deal with. Again, the idea here is really to get to the most obtainable version of the truth, no matter what you're doing, and to be essentially thorough and ask enough questions to make sure that you have all the information. Okay. And don't make up things, obviously. Okay. Because here's one of the things that one of the big misnomers about media ethics, and that is that a lot of people have the fear that actually when they make a mistake in a story that they're going to get sued. But actually, that's really hard to do. Okay, to actually get sued. Okay, there was a Supreme Court case in 1964 called Times v. Sullivan. This is actually really something you get into in media ethics. That basically gave reporters the wide latitude and basically like being human and making mistakes if that happens, and it does happen. And I'm not saying it should be allowed to happen, but it does happen. People are human, and sometimes they hear things wrong. Sometimes they're not thinking. Sometimes they're having a bad day. And what Times v. Sullivan says basically is that reporters can report and they can make mistakes as long as there's not what they call malicious intent, and not or, and as long as there's not this reckless disregard for the truth. Okay. So what that means basically is that, and then if you do commit those sins, you're basically could be sued for libel and lose a lot of money and put your news organization into the ground. Okay. Malicious intent basically mean that you meant to do it. Okay. You purposely did that. I tell the story often about how a long time ago, I had a reporter who was very upset about a lot of things that the students on campus were doing. Students were Muslim, and she belonged to, I hate to say this, but an organization that basically supported the rights of Israel. And there was actually an incident that happened probably a month before then, where there was a student who died from drinking too much. Totally unrelated incident. Okay. Drinking too much at a fraternity party. His name was James Callahan. So fast forward a month later, it was a completely different story about how they were naming a new head of the Palestinian Student Council, I think it was, and she put in the name James Callahan as the person, and I think the name was James something or other or something, I don't know, but or John something, but she put in James Callahan. And I remember saying to another editor, and this was when I was an editor at the Targum, so this actually wasn't a class or anything. And I remember saying to another editor at the Targum, I said, "That's interesting. Like this person who's the head of the Palestinian Student Council has the same name as James Callahan, the teen who died, Lambda Chi Alpha." And she said the same thing. That's interesting. I should have thought of that it could be too much of a coincidence. Well, the next day we actually find out that actually like that was the wrong name that was put in there. So I thought maybe like she just did it by accident. And I actually went up to her and I said, this is ridiculous. Somebody's actually accusing you of actually purposely putting in the word name James Callahan, blah, blah, blah. And what somebody from, I forget, it was another organization supported Palestinian rights, but it was, he said it was an implicit death threat. And that's what I said to her. I said, this is ridiculous. He's saying that this is implicit death threat. How could he say that? And then she actually said to me that it was exactly that, an implicit death threat. Can you believe that? I actually had to report it to the police. Don't really want to talk more about what happened after that, but basically that is malicious intent. Okay. Or somebody actually purposely does something, even in a passive aggressive kind of way, if you would call it. That's definitely not passive aggressive, but that is, that would be an example of somebody actually trying to harm somebody. Okay. or even a group of people. Okay. Reckless disregard of the truth, that would apply to that. But that would also apply to people who just didn't work hard enough to basically get to the truth. They just basically put down maybe the first thing that came off the top of their head, and information, and maybe they made it up, or maybe they didn't listen right, or maybe they didn't like check do their due diligence in reporting. But remember, that can happen a lot, to people. But so it has to be combined with the actual malicious intent, the actual intention of doing not just sloppy reporting, but putting in information intentionally maliciously bad. Okay, that's wrong. Okay. So why do we care then about like media ethics? Why do we have whole chapters dedicated to it? Why do we care about getting to the truth then anyway? Well, it actually has nothing to do with the court systems. It has something to do with credibility. Okay. And we see it now a lot with like news organizations and everything. We see the whole issue of like fake news, all this whole thing. And then you see some sloppy reporting out there, which actually gives weight to the people who complain about it, that reporting is not good. And what happens is it creates like a sense of or a lack of trust, in reporting. I mean, and people will even identify like a certain name, they'll even know like a certain reporter's name, and they'll sometimes you'll see this on Twitter. They'll go after people who they feel like has a certain bias or something like that, and it actually is something that actually will impact, the actual viewership of that, the readership of actually that story, or even that news publication. So you don't want to develop a reputation for that. And also it could affect, it affects your credibility at work too. You could get demoted or fired or whatever, because not only do you not want somebody who's not reporting the facts, you don't want somebody who necessarily lies or something like that on your staff, or just has a reckless disregard of the truth, is just plays it loose with the facts. Because how can you even evaluate that person's work if they like can't provide you a straight reason for something? So, all right. So that's basically what those chapters 5 and 6 deal with there. Okay. What I want to do a little bit is actually get into chapter 10, which deals with something I actually dealt with before, and quotations and attribution. Okay. All right. So wow, this is really small. I don't know why. All right. So again, this is actually the system for attribution, is the system for actually footnoting essentially information that comes from someplace. Okay. Obviously quotes are important, as I've talked about before. Basically it's a way of humanizing the story and talking directly to the reader. Okay, as it says there. Okay, having a really long quote is like basically unreadable. People don't read long quotes. Okay. There is an equation I use that works about quarter. I mean, it kind of goes on and on forever. You want to basically limit that because they're basically unreadable. You want something that actually kind of resembles a conversation. So typically it's usually like something that's expressive or something like that. It's usually like if something has like quotes around it. Okay. You obviously want to avoid something that, as I just described, something that maybe like defames people and can be like provides unnecessary harm. It's not something that's going to basically like end up in a in a court, but it could like harm your credibility. I mean, there's a term that's actually used. It's actually like called burning your sources, and a lot of people say like that's actually something that's kind of like that people do worry about too often, because it's burning your sources. I mean, why should you worry about that? Because sometimes that's happened. Sometimes you have to worry about something controversial, and you're gonna like burn a source. But you don't want to do it unnecessarily either. You want to make sure that actually, like when you're actually quoting somebody, you're quoting them in context, and that actually speaks to accuracy. Because sometimes somebody will actually quote somebody and it actually like will be out of context. They'll say like maybe they say something like, "I don't believe in murder," or "I don't believe he murdered that person," but but that doesn't, maybe they were kind of like saying that sarcastically or something like that. Maybe they said it in a tone like, "I don't believe he murdered that person." You have to make sure that that's why it actually says that actually like that's why it's important to have a transition or an anecdote when you actually, because what you could do is you actually set up the quote, and basically say like, "So and so said sarcastically that there, or so-and-so expressed surprise when they found out so-and-so was accused of murder, okay? So you can actually like provide some sort of context, okay, to the actual quote, okay? Reporters are not economists or ecologists, detectives or diplomats. Nevertheless, they must write effectively about such things as unemployment, the effects of oil spills, blah, blah, blah. Ideally, all direct quotations, opinions, evaluations, and secondhand statements of fact should be attributed to specific individuals. So basically, your two things there for attribution again are this, okay? It should be like, and this is not just a direct quotation, but also paraphrasing, okay? Because most of the story actually is paraphrased. But when you're given information that's like a little known fact, like Joe Biden is president. I know people say he's not, whatever. I'm talking about the QAnon people. But Joe Biden as president is not a little known fact. It's a known fact. It doesn't need attribution. Joe Biden is or maybe something specific like Joe Biden knew about the problems in Afghanistan before he pulled out. Well, that would be like a little known fact, perhaps. And everybody knows, so it'd need attribution. Okay. He said or she said. Okay. Joe Biden screwed up Afghanistan. Well, that'd be the other thing, other reason for like having attribution. That's an opinion. Okay. I know you can say that's fact, whatever. But you could have it could be considered an opinion. Joe Biden's a bad president. Again, I know some people will say that's fact, but that's an opinion. Okay. Joe Biden's a good president. Again, opinion. So that's something where you need a he said or she said, just basically a way of footnoting. It's probably the one part of the sentence that's where it's really not like comes out like controversial. Okay. All right. So basically, the birthing center is an alternative for pregnant women who prefer more personalized care. Well, that's maybe like an opinion. Okay. Is it an alternative? I mean, it could even be considered a little known fact. So that's something that would need attribution. Okay. Congress has wasted time while the problem of unemployment has worsened. Again, that's an opinion. That's someplace that would need attribution. Okay. All right. So, more about the direct quotations. There's also like, we're going to talk in time also about a lot of times you're actually not also identifying, you're not always using sources. We're doing this now. Not always using sources who are people. Sometimes you're going to quote information that comes, especially on days of the internet, they're going to quote information not from people. We're going to do a story later on. And actually, we're going to use whole documents and quote from that. Okay. So sometimes you actually have to quote from a document or like a police report or something, say, according to the police report, according to the documents. If I sound a little rushed, it's because I was actually trying to make sure that I didn't have a really long video this time. So I didn't want to spend too much time on the reading. I just want to kind of give you a general sense of what they're about. But again, we do have readings in this class. I don't test for them. I consider the writing stories themselves a test. So just make sure that you do the reading. Okay. Okay, so what we got to do now, again, we got the rewrites due for the first time to do on Monday, the 14th, the end of the day. We have the rewrites for the leads that'll be due on Monday the 21st, end of the day. And then on Monday the 28th, we will have the story about crime on campus, crime at Rutgers, getting opinions for that. Please do the discussion point for that. Okay. And that's it, guys. All right. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be talking to you.